one. I've had quite a few messages from people asking me to do a more in-depth video showing Clave Groove that I played a couple of videos back. The idea behind the groove is basically to show different ways to use the Latin clave inside non-Latin music. So in this example I use it in a typical funk groove, so that although you're getting that great funky sound with the 16th note ghost notes and the 8th note accents, you're also getting that brilliant kind of groove that you get from Latin music, to get that great dancey sound, because we're using a typical Latin pattern as the bass drum side of the groove. This groove uses a 3/2 clave as my bass drum pattern. Now before we actually go into it, you kind of need to understand what the clave is. Now first and foremost, the clave is a rhythm. It's used in Latin music, particularly the Brazilian stuff, so if you listen to things like bossa nova, you'll hear it all the way through. And secondly, the clave is an instrument. It's a percussion instrument which is kind of like two drumsticks but only about this tall and a lot thicker, and they're used to hit together to make this clave rhythm. Now the rhythm is a 2-bar phrase, that means it lasts for 2 bars, not 1 bar, and it's usually a 3/2 clave or a 2/3 clave. Now don't worry if you don't understand at this stage what it is, you'll understand when I explain it. So the first rhythm I'll do is the 2/3 clave, so you get 3, 4. Okay, the second rhythm is the 3/2 clave. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now the 2/3 and the 3/2, you'll have probably noticed, sound very similar, and that's because if you've got 2 and 3, but you put the 3 here, then you've got 3/2. So it's the same rhythm, but almost starting from the second bar, depending which way you look at it. As I said, the groove that I'm demonstrating here uses a 3/2 clave, but it's important to understand the rhythm. If you want to hear that kind of Latin influence played inside funk music, which is similar to what I'm showing you here, check out David Garibaldi from Tower of Power. He's a really great drummer, but it's got a heavy Latin influence, which is why he displaces the backbeat a lot and gets that typical funk sound that we all know today. Okay, so let's have a look at the different elements that make this groove up. Now the first one is the ride line. The ride line is basically the pattern that the right hand plays. It's called the ride line because obviously back before we were playing grooves on the drum kit, when the jazz guys were just playing and keeping time, they were obviously always on the ride cymbal, which is why the cymbal was called that and why the ride line is called that as well. So the ride line in this groove uses an 8th note hi-hat pattern with an accent on the offbeat, which is on the and, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now there's a certain technique to this. The way that I use it and the way that I play it is by playing the non-accented notes with the tip of the stick on the top of the cymbals. I will then drop the angle of the stick slightly so that I'm playing with the shoulder of the stick closer to the edge of the hi-hats, but I won't actually hit the edge. I'll always keep on the top, because hitting the edge, you know, despite how many drummers do it and how cool it looks, when you're playing on the edge of a hi-hat, it'll break your sticks, it will break your cymbals, and to be honest, it doesn't really sound any good. So we'll always keep on the top, but it will be that kind of pumping motion in the wrist that comes from the molar technique, to play from the top to the shoulder, and again, always on the top of the cymbals. Okay, the snare drum pattern in this is probably the hardest element of the groove, and that's because you're playing a lot of ghost notes. Inside this groove I've put ghost notes on every other 16th note, so that's on the E and the A. Now if we're counting 16th notes, we count 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. Now what's really important when you count these is to actually count each one as an individual beat, 1 E and A, rather than a word. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and. So when you count these individual elements and you've got these 16th notes, our ghost notes are going to be placed on the E and the A. The only problem and hard part with this is when we bring the backbeat in, and I'll explain that in a second. Our backbeat hits have been displaced. Now, a great way to get that really funky sound is to not play the snare necessarily on beats 2 and 4. Instead, we could displace it, and that means moving it. So what I've done in this groove is move the first accent, the first backbeat, from beat 2 to the A of 2. So 2, E and A. Okay? That's quite hard because it's on a 16th note, and normally even if we move it, you'd move it to an 8th note. The second backbeat inside this groove is, instead of on beat 4, I've put it on 4 and. And that's a little easier because of the fact that we're on an 8th note, so 4, E and A. The hard part of that is it's on the last 8th note hit, so it's on your last hi-hat. And usually we're used to going snare, hats at the end of a groove. This time you've got hat, snare. Now the tricky part with this snare hit, as I was saying earlier, is the fact that because you've got ghost notes on the E's and the A, and as I've said, our backbeat is now on an A and an and, on the second backbeat we've got a ghost note on the E and a backbeat on the and. So we've got ghost note, backbeat. That makes it slightly difficult. Now to do this I use, rather than the molar technique, which I was using on the hi-hats, and for that you should definitely check out guys like James Chapman, Jojo Mayer, who are really great at doing this molar technique and have got brilliant explanations of it all over the net. Instead of that, we're using the rebound technique, or the fall down tap up sequence of strokes. Full stroke would be starting at 90 degrees, you'd hit the drum and let the stick rebound back to 90. The next stroke has to be an accent because the stick's already up here, which is a downstroke. So you'd hit the drum starting at 90 degrees and leave it right next to the head. The tap stroke, which follows it, has to be a ghost note because the stick is already low. You'd literally tap the drum and that's it. You don't lift and tap, just touch the head. And the upstroke is a tap stroke where you lift the stick after, so tap, lift. Check out guys like Joe Morello, who was a real pioneer of this technique, and again, Jojo Mayer is always good for hand technique, but using this rebound technique, I'll play an upstroke and a downstroke on the snare drum, and that will get me a really good dynamic variation between the two hits, and then suddenly playing ghost note accent isn't as hard as it seemed. Okay, so I'll show you what it sounds like when you put the when you displace the backbeats on the snare from beats 2 and 4 to beats 2 A and 4 and. When we combine all of the elements of this groove, it's important to keep control. So what I'll do is I'll play it slowly, and then I'll slowly increase the tempo back up to normal, and then I'll go a little bit above normal tempo, and then I might improvise with the groove a little bit, so that you can understand that it's not just a case of learn this groove and play this groove, but use this groove to experiment and make your own. One thing I quite like to do with 16th note patterns that would normally be ghost notes on the snare is maybe move it up onto the hi-hats, because then not only are you playing a 16th note hi-hat pattern, but you're playing with different kind of dynamics. You'll have accents, ghost notes and offbeats, and you can get some really interesting combinations. And then I'll probably move it onto the 2 hi-hats that I've got set up on the kit, so that as well as dynamic variation, we've got tonal variation, and then you can really start to experiment. It's having 2 hi-hats on the kit isn't just to make a big kit or anything like that. You can get some great results. It's well worth looking into doing. practice and experiment with this groove, change things around, find new ways to play the clave, and use certain elements of this groove to create your own and have a lot of fun with it. If you'd like to find out about having lessons with me, then you can send me a message through my YouTube account or email me at sessiondrummerjames@gmail.com to find out where my teaching studios are based, and also to find out about my Skype and FaceTime lessons if you can't get to me in person.